story follows a man who gets transported into a game he was playing, where he is reincarnated into a god named Nebula, and he has to battle 27 other gods to become the sole ruler of the planet and reshape it according to their vision. Part of their challenge is to find and influence a suitable tribe. And luckily for Nebula, he found an extraordinary lizardman named RECAPS, who had been exposed to too many things ever since he was young to turn down an adventure. RECAPS had lost both his parents when he was a child, so he had to grow up without anyone's help, and he had also fought a saber-toothed tiger to protect his tribe at the time when they had gotten kicked out into the wilderness. This caught Nebula's eyes, and so Nebula was convinced that RECAPS have the qualities to be a tribal chief, which also led to RECAPS becoming a high priest that acted on behalf of God's wills. And not too long ago, with the help of God, RECAPS defeated the violent lizardmen tribal chief Boer, and flipped Boer's Drake with one hand, and also defeated an ancient Coleoptera when they crossed the wilderness once again. After that, he saw through the deceits of the Frogmen tribe that he met for the first time in his life, and witnessed the guardian he believed in cut the inferior fiend the Frogmen worshipped into pieces. These experiences filled RECAPS' life with thrill and adventure. As a result, he no longer viewed new adventures as perilous, but rather as opportunities for transformative change. This mindset led him to eagerly investigate a mysterious cave rumored to have a hidden entrance to an unexplored territory. Now on to the next part. The inside of the ancient ruin was a shockingly large empty space. It was roughly hundreds of meters in diameter, and there was green luminous moss here and there, which made it possible to see the overall size of the clearing. In the center of the empty space were arched stone bridges that were around tens of meters tall, and they were placed in a zigzag pattern that led downward. And seeing that there is no other way around, they will have to go on that path where the stones are laid, which led RECAPS to think that it would be nice if they could jump down at once, as it was such a time-consuming journey, since the stairs seemed to be endless after all. With this, RECAPS stood at the edge and think hard for an easier way to descend, but nothing comes into mind. So Jeol then inquired if he is going to pray to their god, to which RECAPS firmly responded that he wouldn't, as he didn't want to trouble their god with such matters. He believed that with their combined presence, they could more easily devise a solution. With this determination, they gathered to brainstorm a plan. They initially considered the idea of weaving long vines into ropes was the most reasonable solution, but considering the time it would take, they decided it would be better to go down the bridge instead. Still, they spent a few more minutes trying to think of something else, but as no great ideas came to them, RECAPS, who valued efficiency in decision-making, ended the meeting, and so they moved on to the next task, and that is to begin descending the bridges with their strong lizardman legs. However, difficulties emerged not long after they got onto the bridges. Several pairs of glowing eyes were fixed on them, as if these monsters were looking at them like a snack, which intrigued the crew on what danger it might be. And as the eyes drew closer, they revealed their source to be a group of rats, notably large ones at that. But Owen, who had lived in the area for a long time, wasn't a stranger to these creatures, and so he informed everyone on what it's supposed to be, describing it as a nutria, and they may have eaten it a few times before, and with this, they remembered exactly what it was, so now they don't have to wonder if it was a threat. But this one looks a lot bigger than the ones they ate, so there's still a mystery within these creatures. Because an average nutria was about 60 centimeters long and weighed around 10 kilograms, but the nutria RECAPS was looking at seemed to be about a meter long, which meant it would weigh tens of kilograms. Additionally, there was something else that piqued RECAPS' attention. Now he gets why he didn't think of nutrias when he first saw these creatures. And that is because nutrias don't travel in groups, or charge at people while baring their front teeth like that. So there is that possibility that these aren't the nutrias they knew of. With this, RECAPS decided to just call them rat monsters. It was a simple yet fitting name, because in RECAPS' opinion, normal animals wouldn't get hostile towards people for no reason. In fact, they would usually run away. But monsters, on the other hand, ran towards people as if they had a purpose. They might be the ones protecting this place, or maybe they're just rats. But regardless of their nature, the safety of his group was paramount. Therefore, he signaled to everyone to ready their weapons, preparing for any potential threat these creatures might pose. And without even a moment's breath, the rat monsters lunged toward RECAPS and the others, but it quickly came to an end. There was around 20 rat monsters, which was quite a lot, but RECAPS and his warriors were veterans. While the bridge was quite narrow for all 7 lizard men to stand on at once, the rat monsters charging at them ended up skewered by the warriors' spears. After that, RECAPS questioned whether the rats they found could be eaten, which Jeol believed there was no apparent reason why they couldn't be eaten, but she was curious about RECAPS' tendency to classify everything as either edible or inedible, and RECAPS quickly justified his approach, stating that determining what is edible is a matter of utmost importance. Jeol agreed that his perspective wasn't wrong. but she proposed an alternative viewpoint. She suggested they could also consider whether the rats could be domesticated and raised similarly to the water buffaloes. This immediately intrigued Rakrak, as expected of his wife, but their journey on this unknown area had just begun, so they will have to put that question for later. So they decided to just remove the organs first in order to easily carry the rats and move along. And while they quickly took the organs out, Owen curiously asked Rakrak and Jaol on what do they mean by raising these rats. And Rakrak was about to answer when he realized he didn't know what it meant himself, as the water buffaloes were raised for food, but that wasn't the case with the drake Manun. They weren't going to eat Manun. So he contemplated the concept of raising animals as akin to having slaves, but slaves were dissatisfied with their status, while things that were raised seemed somewhat satisfied. Slaves would also receive backlash for doing as they wished, so they had to suppress those feelings. But that didn't seem to apply to things that were raised, and with this, he was conflicted on what to say, and so he just answered Owen that he's not sure. But still his intelligent wife might have one. So Rakrak looked at Jowl expecting her to answer instead, but Jowl also seemed troubled by the question, and so Jael also gave up on giving a proper answer, and just explained to Owen that it hasn't been long since they've raised something, so they don't know much about it. They're currently raising water buffaloes in Manun. They gain meat from the buffaloes and strength from Manun, and in exchange, they find plants for the buffaloes and give Manun food. They wish for these relationships to last long. This is the only answer she can give him about what it means to raise something. And Owen thought that was a good enough answer, and so he decided to share to them what he had in mind, and that it might be possible to raise fishes. But Rakrak, being his primitive ass, just think it would be impossible, since he thinks fish just come and go. But this wasn't Rakrak's fault, because in the swamps and ponds Rakrak used to live around, the fish would gradually decrease as they got eaten and eventually disappeared. However, Owen, who used to live with the aquatic frogmen, knew that wasn't the case in bigger ponds, and so Owen could enlighten Rakrak that fish also lay eggs and give birth to young. This was proven by him to be true, as the frogmen would warn them against catching fish when it was breeding season. And with this, Rakrak was extra intrigued, so he immediately asked Owen how could they raise these said fish, and so Owen did just that, explaining to him that there are fish that grow big, which are easier to catch and eat, but they are also easily eaten by other fish when they are young. So it would be nice if they just stack rocks or wood to make a dike to prevent the younger fish from getting eaten, which Rakrak thought it would be difficult to do such a thing in a huge and deep lake. But he didn't say it out loud as he considered it a unique and good idea regardless of it being difficult in reality. And he is thinking of dividing the clan into two, so it'll be cruel to those who have to leave and also to those who have to stay through the winter. So it would be nice to find a way to do what Owen had just suggested. But then all of a sudden, one of the warriors handling a rat monster screamed, and Rakrak quickly turned around and approached the warrior and looked at the warrior closely. The warrior held his hand in pain. One of his fingers smelled slightly burnt, but it doesn't seem like he got bitten though. So Rakrak asked the warrior what happened, to which the warrior explained that all he did was touch the rat, and he felt pain. This instantly piqued Rakrak's interest, and so he went ahead and reached toward the rat monster. And as his finger came close to the rat, a bright spark suddenly climbs up to Rakrak's hand. But he wasn't a stranger to this kind of thing, as Rakrak knew the concept of static electricity from when he touched fur leather in winter. But this was too painful to be compared to that, and looking at him in pain, his wife Jowl immediately went to him with concern in her eyes, as this was also a shock to her, as she doesn't have a clue on what is going on. And only Nebula, who was watching everything unfold from behind, realized what it was. The Nutria was possessed by the demonic energy of the ruin that he hoped it would not be. And this was because divinity wasn't the only source of power in the Lost World. For example, the last time Nebula had won the game on Earth, he used nuclear weapons, which was technology rather than divinity. Divinity and science would grow directly proportional to each other until the Middle Ages, and in modern times, they became negatively correlated. When people become faithful to their gods, they tend to distort science. On the other hand, when people become proficient with scientific technology and knowledge, they believe in God less. This was because science could do what the gods could do. But this decrease in belief was still less than in the real-world Earth. There's no way to really know if gods exist on Earth. But gods are real in the Lost World. And in the Lost World, alongside divinity and science was magic. Magic was also negatively correlated with divinity, but it was different from science in that the negative correlation between magic and divinity existed from the very start. This is because magic is its own force. Anyone or anything that used powerful magic in ancient times was unstoppable. Those who had magic would be perceived as a god, and thus they wouldn't believe in a god. Magical powers naturally began to weaken and fall during modern times as science developed. But not every game progresses until modern times, and he had also secured quite a few wins with magic. Therefore, he knows too well that it was important for players of the Lost World to not only utilize divinity, but also balance science and magic well. Nebula had a good understanding of these rules, and always thought of using magic if necessary. But he didn't think he would obtain demonic magic this quickly. And among the many kinds of ancient ruins were the demonic ruins, which were considered an ultimate dungeon to obtain demonic magic. Simply put, acquiring demonic magic would grant the individual the ability to learn magic. Additionally, the effect not only applies to the individual making the achievement, but also to a few generations of their close kins, especially if it's a clan society like RECAPS clan. All members of the clan may obtain demonic magic. That was the dangerous part. Obtaining demonic magic did not mean one would become a wizard right away. In order to use magic, spells needed to be learned, and these types of spells required research on ancient ruins, all kinds of ancient knowledge, and magic. However, those who had demonic magic were powerful just by having it. They could make small flames, make objects shine, or even make sparks fly. And this ancient ruin will give electrical demonic magic, as it was described in the system window Nebula was looking at. Electricity is always useful. It's on the better side of demonic magic. But the problem was that if demonic magic was obtained, there would be penalties in obtaining faith points. RECAPS was likely to be the one to conquer the ancient ruin, so there was no question that RECAPS would receive the demonic magic. In addition to that, it was possible that the 350 lizardmen related to RECAPS within his clan would also receive the demonic magic, and 3 out of the 350 would get it for sure. And they'll just think it's some kind of mysterious power. It'll even seem fancy since it's electrical demonic magic. However, Nebula knew what would happen afterwards. Making use of the magical ruins was a common mistake among the beginners of the Lost World. Beginners would become obsessed with the fact that they could obtain magic and lead their tribes to demonic ruins just to make them obtain demonic magic. They would also then focus their resources on those who had the demonic magic and increase their XP. The cultivated individuals would pass on their demonic magic to their descendants, and the demonic magic would become stronger and stronger over the generations, until finally, a wizard emerged. A wizard is one of the best classes from the beginning to the middle stages of the game. Wizards had strong powers that no individual could handle. The stronger they became, the greater the number of enemies they could deal with at once, which would lead to them gaining the authority to create aristocracy. Above all, because the source of the wizard's powers were magic rather than a God-given gift, they would not rely on a god. And in the Lost World, demonic magic stemmed from an ancient evil called red herring. That's why divinity and demonic magic come into conflict. Once wizards became that powerful, even the players would not be able to do anything to control them. Therefore, the players would invest in witch hunting or taboo to decrease the influence of demonic magic as a result. Still, it is possible to control the power somehow, but in the process, too much time and resources would be wasted. Such power might be a perk in the beginning, but that all becomes meaningless if resources are wasted on unnecessary things by the middle of the game. And a player such as Nebula would be able to balance magic well, allowing him to apply it to his build with no other problems. But it was tiring to do so, and determining whether to increase or decrease unnecessary variables was also an important task in the game. According to the statistical side of things, demonic magic did have a lower win rate due to beginners getting overthrown by wizards, but it was still on the higher side of things when compared to pure divinity or deity-demon blend. But he does aim to play with more variability, so he was contemplating if he should warn RECAPS that the demonic ruin will start to show its true colors and try to tempt them. And with RECAPS' personality, he would go to the ends of the ancient ruin if he doesn't warn him. And so Nebula agonized whether to warn RECAPS, but then decided not to. This was because once he checked RECAPS' stats again, he discovered a unique ability that hadn't been there until recently. It was likely to have appeared as RECAPS defeated Shunin and Aloy's frogmen. With this, Nebula was convinced that it might be fine to just leave it to RECAPS, as he believes that RECAPS will get the best outcome, since there is a way to acquire both divinity and demonic magic without getting penalties after all. And so Nebula just waited and see what will happen. Meanwhile, back to RECAPS' side of things. Amid the sharp pain that RECAPS was experiencing, RECAPS suddenly heard a voice speak to him, asking him if he wants this kind of power, which made RECAPS look around, but saw nothing unordinary. So his attention went to Jaol, who was frantically asking if he was okay, to which RECAPS replied that he was, but seeing what happened to him, they should make sure to kill these rat monsters. So those who know how to shoot arrows, he asked them to ready their bows, and those who are injured should watch the rear. But as he was instructing them, RECAPS then heard the voice again, asking him again if he was interested in the power displayed. Rakrak only moved his eyes this time and saw a wide, transparent creature crackling with blue sparks hovering in the air. Its outer appearance was that of a stingray, but Rakrak, who had never seen a stingray before, didn't know what it was. And as he was wondering what to say to it, the electric stingray then told Rakrak that it can hear him even if he speaks with his mind. This fascinated Rakrak, so he did just that, promptly asking the stingray what it was, to which it confidently responded that he is the spirit that protects this ruin, and he is only visible to those with strong powers. But Rakrak thought that the stingray said was a lie. But as he thought of this, he realized this thought wasn't communicated to the spirit. Consequently, he realized that shallow thoughts are communicated, but deeper thoughts aren't. So if the stingray really is a spirit that can distinguish those with strong powers, he can try to read this thought too. But as he expected, the electric stingray wasn't able to read this thought. With this in mind, Rakrak was more confident in conversing with this unknown entity. So he then asked the stingray, "What power is it talking about?" Which the stingray proudly responded that he is talking about electricity. The power to burn other beings and create light. Sun-like light and fire-like heat, and it can give him that power. And Rakrak nodded in a subtle way that would not seem strange to the others that were with him, and responded that he will gladly accept it if it gives it to him. But the electric stingray hesitated, revealing that there was one more condition Rakrak had to meet before receiving the promised power. This revelation caused Rakrak to frown. As expected, this stingray was a scammer. It is not here to give but to trade. And so with a cold tone in his thoughts, Rakrak schooled the stingray that if it was really initiating a trade in the first place, it has to state the conditions first, and it needs to make sure to convey what it is giving him and what it is that it wants from him. But because of what it just did, Rakrak expressed that he was disappointed and felt a lack of trust and straightforwardness in their dealings. So he might not be willing to accept his offer anymore. Still, the stingray tried to convince Rakrak that meeting the condition would be easy for his strength. But Rakrak had enough of its bullshit, so he looked at the stingray with the most devious side-eye and commanded it to not lie no more. And he doubles down with a warning that if he felt even an ounce of lie on the words it was about to say, he would just go back right now and block the entrance to this cave that seemed to have been blocked for no apparent reason. Then he could order his warriors to prevent anyone from entering this cave and warn all the descendants of his tribe to never enter. So if there is really something it wants from him, it should know its place and show the appropriate attitude. And with this, the electric stingray was clearly in a state of panic. And this was such a turn of events, because in Nebula's knowledge, the intelligence of spirits wasn't that high. However, it wasn't easy for individuals who entered a demonic ruin to resist the temptation of the spirits. As expected, this was Rakrak's new ability in play, as he could now detect bullshit even from miles away, and this skill proved advantageous in negotiations, allowing him to gain the upper hand by identifying and leveraging any untruths or exaggerations presented by others.